Here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 8. So, the third century crisis, the first thing to say is, what is it? This is a confluence of three different sets of catastrophes: political anarchy that involves an inconstancy amongst who is the emperor, a constant revolving door of emperors that promotes instability and lack of faith in the leadership of the government; a economic collapse that is precipitated by plague and the draining of the economy to military and government resources, and perhaps most of all, the debasement of the currency, so the currency becomes valueless and meaningless. Third, a military disaster that involves invasion of the Roman Empire from two different directions. And this is perhaps the most relevant thing here, is that there is massive invasion and reduction of Roman territory from the east and the west, which is overtaxing a military system that is already strained by the economic fallout of debasement and plague, and all of the other problems that are being caused by failure of leadership at the top that begins in earlier periods. And so the military is unable to perform the simple function of defending Roman territory. All of these three things together constitute the third century crisis. And, these things interlace with each other, as I discussed in the other video. So the debasement of the currency brings about both a weakness in the economy and a lack of trust in the political leadership, and undermines military capacity. The fallout of this, in turn, the effect of the economic collapse means that the military is unable to provision goods and to fully pay its soldiers, is having to requisition items in kind, so forth and so on. All these things feed upon each other. The debasement gets worse and worse. The political instability gets worse and worse. The military situation gets worse. So we have this period within the third century in which all these things are feeding onto each other and devolving into this spiraling crisis that threatens to bring about the utter collapse of the Roman Empire. Marcus Aurelius prepared Commodus, but he still turned out to be a bad emperor. So what is it about this that went wrong? Well, Marcus Aurelius trained Commodus, but the nature of the Principate, as some of you pointed out, is that it depends upon the personality of the individual who is given this responsibility, as well as their capacity. And for whatever reason, Marcus Aurelius does not see that Commodus's personality is unsuited to this task. He has both arrogance and vanity, and is attempting to overcome the adulation of his father and all of the Nerva Antonines before him by making himself a larger-than-life kind of figure. So he adopts the persona of Hercules, not to say that he is a god, but to say that he is a larger man than ordinary people. And all of this, this recklessness, this arrogance, deliberate snubbing of senatorial wisdom and involvement. It reminds people of previous young emperors who acted arrogantly and recklessly, and who spun out of control, like Caligula and Nero. This is compounded by the fact that Commodus's advisors are divided, and so there isn't a set policy that seems to be the obvious path for Commodus to follow. So, he follows his own his own needs, his own emotional needs, rather than policies that are organized and structured in a way that comes from political and senatorial debate. And the wars that his father had undertaken, Commodus scales back, is not pursuing, and this leads to certain losses on the frontiers as well as resentment and lack of trust amongst the military leadership. And so he manages to alienate the senates, the military leadership. He comes out as a champion of the people. The way this is manifested is through his gladiatorial combats, and this divides the people as well. Some see him as a great kind of sort of a legendary hero made flesh. Others see this as being something that is not imperial, something that is not what he should be doing. He should be, running the empire and not out there in the gladiatorial arena. And so everything about Commodus is divisive, and this is partly deliberate in his effort to set himself apart and above. And the result is that he ends up being both ineffective and assassinated. All the following are true for Palmyra. So Palmyra, a key place in the story of the 3rd century. The answer is that it was the site of Rome's victory against the Seleucids. Rome's victory against the Seleucids back in the days of the Roman Republic was at a place called Magnesia. All these other things about Palmyra are true. What is a Codex book? So here's the thing about a question like this. A lot of you mentioned that, well, it's a book, but what this question is asking is, what is it? And this is in contrast to what it replaced. Why is its introduction significant? Is asking, how is it a change from? So you want to say, okay, what information was stored on before the use of the Codex book is scrolls, and for any amount of information, this ends up being heavy and unwieldy. You end up with a very large work like, say, the Iliad, which would have been widely distributed throughout the ancient world, would be a bucket full of heavy scrolls, very difficult to carry around. And the result of this is this has an effect of limiting the portability of information, the access to information, the dissemination of information. Information tends to be localized around places in which these scrolls are stored, and is under the control of librarians and pedagogues and philosophers and people that are teaching knowledge, rather than knowledge being spread about through ordinary people. And the Codex book is a transformation, a revolution in this, because it provides a set of folded bunches of paper that are sewn together to create a bound object, which is much more portable, much more accessible. You can go to any page easily in a Codex book. It is useful for recording information, for making notes, and for writing your own knowledge down, or accumulating the knowledge of others. But most of all, it's useful for being a medium that can easily be spread, because it is inexpensive, because it is easily accessible, and is by this means that in late antiquity there's a great proliferation of information, particularly and especially the Christian Gospels. And so this is one of the means by which the Christian church is able to rise into prominence in the 3rd and 4th centuries and become the dominant force within the Roman Empire. And that's the end of the quiz. Email me with any questions.